DC racked up 29,000 crimes last year, and somehow thought the answer was keeping regular folks unarmed. Now the tables have just turned, and carry permits are about to roll out quicker than carjackers can steal your ride. What's up, everyone? This is Sully from Line 45, and today I'm diving straight into how the crime capital of America just got forced to open the floodgates on concealed carry, and why this one move might shake gun laws coast to coast. Before we dive in, do me a solid. Smash that subscribe, tap the bell, hit all the dang buttons down there. You don't gotta, but it keeps this train rolling and lets me crank out more of this wild gun talk for y'all. All right, enough of that. Let's get back to it. DC's reputation as America's crime capital. Here's the lay of the land. Straight. DC's crime picture isn't a headline. It's a habit the city's been trying to kick. After a nasty 2023 spike, 2024 closed with 29,348 total reported crimes and 3,469 violent offenses, a 35% drop in violent crime year over year. Robberies fell hard, and carjackings got cut nearly in half to about 496 cases in 2024, down from around 950 in 2023, I think. That's progress, but nobody's throwing a parade. Roll the tape into 2025, and the trend's still easing. As of late August, violent crime is down roughly 27% year-to-date versus the same point in 2024, with robberies down about 30%. Motor vehicle theft is basically flat, and total crime is tracking about 7% lower. Again, better, not fixed. Here's one ugly constant. Who's doing the carjackings? MPD and the U.S. Attorneys have said for a while that juveniles make up a big chunk of carjacking arrests, over half by some counts. So even with the drop, the cases we do see tend to be messy, fast, and violent. So yeah, DC's numbers cooled off from the peak, but folks still feel exposed walking to their cars at night or gassing up on the wrong block. That's the mood this permit story lands in. And here's where it gets interesting. While the city's charts finally tilt the right way, the feds and MPD have been opening the spigot on lawful carry, adding walk-ins and faster processing to put legal heat in the hands of vetted adults. I'll show you exactly how the old red tape worked and what just got shredded. A permit system built to fail you. Here's the truth, and it'll tick you off if you've ever tried to play by the rules. For years, DC ran a permit system that wasn't about safety. It was about keeping you out. Until 2017, you couldn't even apply unless you had a good reason. And that didn't mean living in a rough neighborhood. Nope, you had to show paperwork like death threats, or prove you were a business owner hauling bags of cash. Regular folks? Forget it. That's why the Ren v. DC case blew the doors off that may-issue scam and forced the city into a shall-issue setup. But even after the court told them to quit playing games, DC just got sneakier. 16 hours of classroom time, plus 2 hours on the range, all with certified instructors who charge real money. Fingerprints, in-person interviews, copies of your IDs, and you couldn't even drop the paperwork online. You had to snag an appointment and pray it didn't get pushed back. By law, MPD was supposed to decide in 60 days. But everybody knew that was a joke. 4 to 6 months if you were lucky, and plenty of folks were still waiting a year. It wasn't a permit process. It was a slow bleed. The city kept its manual paper files crawling across desks, short-staffed offices dragging it out, and citizens left hanging while carjackers roamed free. That's the chokehold DC put on your rights. And it's exactly the wall Trump just bulldozed through. And once you see how he did it, you'll understand why this isn't just paperwork, but a full reset of power. Only 1% armed in a city that needs it most. Look at the numbers and tell me this ain't upside down. In a city where tens of thousands of crimes get reported every year, barely 1.2% of DC's residents hold a concealed carry permit. Think about that for a second. Out of more than 670,000 people, only a sliver have the legal ability to defend themselves outside their front door. You'd figure a city that's been dealing with carjackings, robberies, and violent assaults would want more good folks armed, not fewer. Now stack that against the rest of America. Florida, for example, had over 2.5 million active permits on the books before it went permitless in 2023. Texas is the same story. Millions licensed even before their constitutional carry kicked in. That's everyday people walking around legally strapped, which shifts the balance between predators and prey. D.C.? It was basically a monopoly for the criminals. Here's what that tiny 1% figure really meant. If you lived in the southeast or northeast, where carjackings were running hot, the odds of a victim being armed were almost zero. That makes targets softer, and bad guys know it. Even MPD admitted repeat offenders were fueling a lot of those numbers, and juveniles made up a scary slice of the carjacking arrests. So when Trump pushed the accelerator on permits, it wasn't just paperwork moving faster. It was plugging a hole D.C. had left wide open. And that's why his move with the Home Rule Act hit like a gut punch to the city council. Trump's sledgehammer, the Home Rule Act. Here's where the story flips from slow-motion bureaucracy to a full-blown power play. Washington, D.C. isn't a state. It runs under the Home Rule Act of 1973, which basically lets Congress and the White House step in when they feel the city isn't handling business. Trump leaned straight into that authority. By using federal oversight, he cleared the logjam that city officials had been dragging their feet on for years. That move rattled D.C. leadership because it cut right through the city council's long history of throwing up hurdles around gun rights. For decades, they set the toughest restrictions in the country, banking on the fact that federal courts would back them up. But the ground shifted after Wren versus D.C., and then after the Supreme Court's Bruin ruling in 2022. The constitutional tide was already turning, and Trump's team saw the opening to force compliance. Instead of nibbling around the edges, the order pushed resources straight into MPD, more staff to handle applications, streamlined procedures, and federal funding to digitize records. That's why the turnaround shrank from months to a week. To gun owners across the country, it sent a message. If D.C., of all places, can be forced into honoring carry rights, then every other city sitting on restrictive systems better pay attention. And the ripple effect isn't just legal, it's cultural. The so-called crime capital just got a federal shove, and the old excuses for delay don't carry the same weight anymore. The fastest permits in the country. You want to talk about whiplash? D.C. went from dragging folks through 6 months of waiting hell to handing out carry permits in under a week. I ain't exaggerating. People who used to sit on their hands for a year are now walking out in 4 to 8 days with a legal card in their pocket. That's like watching the DMV suddenly turn into Chick-fil-A drive-through speed. Nobody in D.C. thought they'd live long enough to see that. Here's how it happened. MPD pulled in extra staff, cut down the nonsense paperwork, and switched the whole system to digital. Used to be you had to beg for an appointment weeks out just to drop off your fingerprints. Now you can walk in the next morning. Federal money and resources kicked in too, and all those dusty paper files got shoved into an automated system that actually works. What used to crawl across desks for months now clears in days. And think about what that does for the everyday folks. That nurse working nights who kept getting harassed on her way to the car? She doesn't have to wait until next year to finally get protection. That cabbie who runs routes through the roughest corners of the city? He isn't rolling dice for 6 months, praying nobody jacks him before D.C. gets around to his paperwork. That kind of turnaround changes the whole mood. The crime capital suddenly became one of the fastest places to get legal carry, and that's a headline nobody saw coming. D.C.'s new experiment. Will guns stop the bleeding? Here's the million-dollar question. Does putting more legal guns on the street tilt things in favor of the good guys? Or does it just add fuel to an already messy fire? D.C.'s crime numbers have finally cooled down from that brutal 2023 spike, with violent crime dropping around 35% in 2024 and tracking another 27% lower in 2025. But the city still logged thousands of robberies and carjackings, and a big chunk of those were tied to repeat offenders and juveniles. When you've got crews treating car theft like an after-school activity, the stakes are already high. Supporters of the new permit system argue that arming responsible residents makes life riskier for criminals. If you're running stick-ups and don't know which cab driver, night shift nurse, or store clerk might be carrying, Suddenly that hustle isn't as easy. That's been the logic in states like Texas or Florida, where millions of licensed carriers were part of everyday life long before constitutional carry. On the flip side, critics warn that DC's dense layout, constant foot traffic, and political targets make it a different ballgame. They worry about escalation in a city that's already volatile. But here's the thing. DC's experiment isn't theoretical anymore. The permits are out, and the clock's ticking. We're about to see in real time if putting firearms back in the hands of regular people actually changes the balance of fear on the streets. And that sets the stage for what the rest of America's watching closely. What this means for the rest of America. Tell me this ain't wild. The same city that's been the poster child for anti-gun politics just flipped and is handing out carry permits like it finally remembered the Constitution exists. D.C. was supposed to be the crown jewel of gun control, the place politicians pointed at and said, "See, this is how you keep folks safe." What did it really become? The carjacking capital of America, where regular people got hung out to dry while criminals ran the streets. Now the tables have turned, and the lesson is clear. When even D.C. can't justify choking off carry rights anymore, the whole playbook starts to unravel. Think about the message this sends to New York, Chicago, and L.A. Those cities have been running the same con for decades. Drag out the paperwork, bleed you with fees, and hope you give up before you ever see a permit. But D.C.'s collapse proved it doesn't have to be that way. If the capital of the free world can approve vetted citizens in under a week, every excuse those cities lean on just got torched. And obviously, this ain't only a political shift. It's a cultural gut punch. D.C. residents who were trained to believe they had no options are finally realizing they don't have to walk into the night defenseless. That changes how people carry themselves, how criminals size up targets, and how lawmakers spin their stories. If carry rights can root themselves in the hardest soil in the country, then the dominoes are already shaking coast to coast.